Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Noah here breaking down the NBA slate on Draftkings and Yahoo for Tuesday, November the 26th. We only got a 2-game slate for today, so it's going to be a pretty quick video. We're just going to run through each position. I'll hit on the plays that stand out to me the most on this 2-game slate. We'll work our way through the player pool. I will touch on some Draftkings guys that I like, or guys I like on Draftkings, and then we will talk about some plays on Yahoo as well. Just before we do get started, as always, I would appreciate it if you would drop a like down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Click that notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload. You can also follow me on Twitter at DFS by Noah. I am very active over on Twitter. Feel free to give me a follow down below. Also want to let you guys know that I will be making my NFL video for the Thanksgiving Day slate. That will be up later Tuesday afternoon. I'm recording this video on Monday night, late Monday night, and I'll upload it late Monday night. But I will have my video up for the Thanksgiving Day NFL slate, probably around like 2 or 3 o'clock on Tuesday. So if you're playing the NFL slate on Thanksgiving, definitely would appreciate it if you would check that video out. But let's go ahead and take a look at today's 2-gamer. Start off at point guard. So Luka Doncic, our most expensive option on this slate, $11,400, or he's the most expensive point guard. He's also the most expensive stud in general. $11,400. Next most expensive stud is Nikola Jokic at $9,800. Then you have Brad Beal at $93, Kawhi at $88, Paul George $82, and then it just goes like Murray, Porzingis, Harrell. So looking at Luka, I mean, he's been absolutely insane this season. This matchup against the Clippers, like this is probably one of the tougher matchups he's going to have this season. This is a Clippers team that I expect to be very good defensively this season, especially now that they have both Kawhi and Paul George healthy. Both of those guys are elite defenders. Patrick Beverley is a very good defender as well. So this is going to be a tough matchup for Luka, but his usage is just so hard to avoid. I mean, how much he is used in this offense is going to make him a top play pretty much every slate that he's on. His price has gotten to a point where you do have to consider, is he worth the salary? I mean, there was points where Luka was like 9,800, 10K, and he was just one of the easiest plays on the slate. Now that he's up to 11,400, I don't think like he's a must play or a lock and load, but if you just look at his usage this season with the Mavericks, 543 minutes played, 35.9% usage rate, averaging 1.77 fantasy points per minute. It's pretty much him and Porzingis doing everything for this team. I like Luka here a lot. I mean, I think there's some good value we'll talk about later on in the video that should make it easy to get him in. So I'm going to be paying up for Luka in probably most of my lineups. I do play multiple lineups on 2-game slates. Usually I just run one lineup, but on like short slates, I like to just play a ton of lineups and just kind of get different combinations. Like I don't just like to play one lineup on a 2-game slate. I usually don't play cash either. I mainly focus on tournaments on 2-game slates. So I'll definitely have a lot of exposure to Luka today. He is one of my favorite plays on both sides. It's really hard to avoid him on a 2-game slate, even in a tough matchup against the Clippers. But then if you're not going to Luka, just other point guards we have. You got guys in the mid-range like Jamal Murray, Lou Williams, Will Barton. I don't think any of these guys are going to be core plays for me. I mean, Jamal Murray is someone that has a ton of upside. It's a really good matchup against the Wizards. He'll probably be guarded by Isaiah Thomas, and that is a very good matchup for Jamal Murray. He's one of those guys that gives you a ton of upside, but has a very low floor. So he's not like an optimal play by any means. He's going to be, I'd imagine he's going to be pretty low owned for a 2-game slate. He'll probably be like maybe 20% owned, which is pretty low for a 2-game slate. I mean, this is a guy that has 60, 50-point upside when he's really knocking down his shots. I mean, we've seen him go for double-doubles this season. He had 67 DK points against Memphis, had 39, 4, and 8 in that game. Against the Sixers, had 22, 6, and 11. So the guy has a ton of upside. He definitely has a low floor, though, for 7,400. Like, he's not an optimal play by any means, but if I'm building out a lineup and I got 7,400 left as my last spot, I'm totally fine putting Jamal Murray in there. I wouldn't be, like, reconstructing my lineup to find ways to get off of Jamal Murray. I do prefer Jamal Murray over guys like Lou Williams, Will Barton. We will talk about Will Barton on Yahoo. It's pretty hard to avoid him. We'll talk about him as small forward when we get there. But then for value, under 5K, you got Patrick Beverley, Isaiah Thomas, Ish Smith, DeLon Wright. These are just some of the guys I see under 5K. So Isaiah Thomas is someone I want to talk about. He's 4,600 on DraftKings in a matchup against Denver. I mean, this is a really tough matchup against Denver. If we just look at pace so far this season, Denver is one of the slowest pace teams in the league. They're actually dead last in pace this season. So this is definitely a pace down spot for the Wizards. If we look at defensive rating as well, Denver does have a pretty solid defense. They're top 10 in defensive rating. They rank 6th. So not a good matchup for these Wizards guys, but it's a 2-game slate. I mean, you're going to have to get exposure to some of these guys. Isaiah Thomas seems pretty locked into about 30 minutes most nights, at least high 20s, low 30s most nights, especially if a game is competitive. He has lost some minutes recently, like 24 minutes against the Spurs, 21 against the Hornets. I don't think he really dealt with foul trouble or anything in those games, just wasn't playing well. I mean, if he's playing well, they're going to run him out there. As long as like Ish Smith doesn't come off the bench and just start making a ton of shots, Isaiah Thomas should be looking at 29 to 30 minutes most nights. Tough matchup against Denver, no doubt, but I really like Isaiah Thomas as a value at 4,600. I think he can give you 30 DraftKings points. He's done it multiple times this season. If you're a narrative street guy, I mean, Isaiah Thomas was on the Nuggets for a little bit last season, I believe. I don't even think he ever played a game with them. I don't think he was ever or he did play with the Nuggets. I don't know why I thought that, but he wasn't like a big part of that team, but it is a revenge game for him for what that's worth. He was with the Nuggets a little bit last season, if you take that into account. But I do like Isaiah Thomas as a value play, 4,600 on DraftKings. We're going to talk about some other values you can look to on Yahoo. I don't think you need to go to Isaiah Thomas, but he is $16 at point guard. If you're not going to like Luka or Jamal Murray, I mean, you really only have like two other options. That's either Beverly or Thomas. Maybe you could consider Ish Smith. But the point guard position on Yahoo, I'm probably just going to be jamming in Luka at $54. And then the last guy I want to talk about as a value is Jordan McRae. So Jordan McRae, 3,600 on DraftKings. He has minimum salary over on Yahoo. I think he's a pretty good value over there as well. He's at shooting guard. I think you could definitely play him at shooting guard for a value or as a value play. So just the last few games, he's been seeing pretty good run off the bench, 20 and 24 minutes, has 25 and 23 DraftKings points. I know he's been playing really well, like outperforming Troy Brown. I need to pull up their rotation and see if he closed that game out over Troy Brown, because I know Troy Brown has been losing some minutes recently. I imagine that's because McRae has been playing so well. So if we could just look at this game against Sacramento, I believe this was a close game if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull up the game log real quick just so I can see. Yeah, it was a close game. The Wizards only lost by 7. McRae played 23 minutes in that game. Obviously, they started the game with Isaiah Thomas, Rui, Troy Brown, Thomas Bryant, Bradley Beal, but it looks like they closed out the game with Isaiah Thomas, Thomas Bryant. Where'd Bradley Beal? Did Bradley Beal even play? Okay, Bradley Beal played the entire fourth quarter. They closed out with Bryant, IT, and then they had Bertans out there closing out the game, and then it looks like Ish Smith played the entire fourth quarter, which I don't think happens most nights. But you did get Jordan McRae playing a decent amount of minutes in that game. He played about halfway through the fourth quarter, and then you had Thomas Bryant and IT sub in whenever he came out. You had Ish Smith sub out, and then IT replaced Ish Smith, and then you had Thomas Bryant come in for McRae. I imagine that was probably like a weird lineup they were running. But, I mean, I think there's a possibility that you see Jordan McRae close out some games this season, especially if he's playing well. They will definitely play him over like Troy Brown, especially if he's playing well. So I do like Jordan McRae as a value at 3,600. Coming off the bench, if this game blows out, which, I mean, there's definitely a possibility with how good this Denver team is, playing on the road for Washington. This is a pretty tough spot for them, having to go into Denver. Right now, if we do look at spreads, this game does have a 9.5 point spread, a 227 total. So there's some blowout potential here. If it does blow out, I mean, that's going to benefit Jordan McRae. 3,600 on DraftKings. I think he is one of the better like sub 4K values. I mean, there's not much value that I love under 4K, but Jordan McRae does stand out to me on both sides. Point guard, shooting guard on DraftKings. On Yahoo, you can play him at shooting guard, and he's minimum salary over there. So at point guard, over on Yahoo, just running through this position, I mean, I pretty much talked about it. Like, you're either paying up for Luka at 54 or you're going to like Jamal Murray. I don't see myself playing a ton of like Patrick Beverly. Maybe I'll have a little bit of Isaiah Thomas, but there's really no cheap value at point guard that I love besides like Isaiah Thomas. So mainly just going to be playing a lot of Luka at point guard on Yahoo. Now shooting guard on DraftKings, I think there's a couple plays here that stand out. You do have Bradley Beal, Kawhi Leonard at the top of this position. Really interesting that Kawhi Leonard has shooting guard eligibility on DraftKings. I don't even know if he has played shooting guard this season, but you got Beal at 9,300, Kawhi at 8,800. I do like Kawhi Leonard quite a bit on DraftKings at his price tag. I think he is one of the better price studs on this slate. I mean, you got Beal for 9,300 in a pretty tough spot against Denver. You got Kawhi for $500 cheaper, and then you have PG at 8,200. It's going to be pretty hard to get like Luka and like Kawhi and another stud. You're going to have to probably go probably two studs at the max on this slate. I think Luka, at least on DraftKings, Luka and Kawhi are the two guys that I like the most. So Kawhi 8,800 just, it feels a little bit too cheap for his usage that he has with this Clippers team. Even with Paul George returning, I mean, his usage is still through the roof. We can pull it up real quick just so you guys can see. It's going to be Kawhi and PG doing a lot of the heavy lifting for this Clippers team. Just looking at their usage so far this season, you got 385 minutes of Kawhi, 36.2% usage rate, averaging 1.52 fantasy points per minute. Paul George has played 174 minutes with the Clippers this season, 32.7% usage rate, 1.5 fantasy points per minute. So pretty identical numbers for both guys. Leonard does have a little bit of a higher usage rate, but they're averaging about the same fantasy points per minute. Obviously, with Kawhi resting some games when PG was playing, that's going to boost PG's fantasy points per minute total. But we saw last game against the Pelicans, even when Kawhi only plays like 28 minutes, or I don't know why he only played 28 minutes in that game. I mean, they did win by 25, so I guess that's why it was a little bit of a blowout. And then he had 5 fouls against Houston, so I imagine he dealt with some foul trouble in those games. Only played 28 minutes the last 2 games, still put up over 40 DraftKings points in both games. You have a very high floor from Kawhi. His usage, even playing alongside PG, is going to be through the roof with this team, so the ceiling is there for him. He's 8,800. He's cheaper than guys like Jokic, cheaper than guys like Bradley Beal. I think that's where he really stands out to me on DK. Now, if we look at the studs on Yahoo, you got Luka as the most expensive player at 54, and then Kawhi is second most expensive at 47. Bradley Beal and Paul George are both 44. And then you have Jokic down there at 40. So we'll talk about Jokic on Yahoo. I think that's where I have a lot more interest in him, given that he's the 5th most expensive stud rather than the 2nd most expensive stud, just comparing his price to DK. So really like paying up for Kawhi on DraftKings. I think I do slightly prefer him over Bradley Beal. But like I said, I do make multiple lineups on these 2-game slates, so I will for sure have exposure to Bradley Beal. But if I'm not going to the top, I mean, there's some value here you could look to. Tim Hardaway is going to continue to start for the Mavericks. He is going to start over Seth Curry. He played really well in their last game against Houston, had like his best game of the year. I mean, probably one of the best games Tim Hardaway's had just throughout his career. Played 38 minutes against the Rockets and had 49 DraftKings points, had 31, 4, and 5. He shot incredibly well, 55% from the field. He took 18 shots in that game. He was 5 for 11 from 3. Obviously, you can't expect that again from Tim Hardaway. But if he's going to continue to start and continue to play pretty solid minutes in competitive games, only reason his minutes were like in the 20s and high teens against Cleveland and Golden State was due to blowout. I mean, the Cavs lost by 40. The Mavericks won that game by over 40 points. They beat the Warriors by like 40 points. So obviously Hardaway's minutes are going to be down in those games. This game against the Clippers should be competitive, so we're probably going to get 30 minutes from Tim Hardaway. At 5K on DraftKings, he's a pretty good value if you want to play him as shooting guard or small forward. If we go over to Yahoo, just looking at the small forward position, you really only have about 4 playable options here. You got Kawhi at 47, Will Barton at 23, Tim Hardaway at 14, then DFS at 11. I mean, I guess you could play like Troy Brown for minimum salary if you wanted to, but I'd probably just play DFS over him. I mean, it's going to be between Kawhi, Will Barton, or Tim Hardaway on who I play most at small forward, and I think Tim Hardaway definitely stands out just given his $14 salary. If I can get up to Will Barton, I will for sure try and do that because I think Will Barton's a very strong option at only $23. But I'm totally fine dropping down to Hardaway, and I think you can honestly play both guys together, play Will Barton and Hardaway in the same lineup. I do like Hardaway quite a bit as a value play on Yahoo at $14. But then Gary Harris is the last guy I want to talk about as shooting guard. Never a guy that's going to project insanely well. I mean, he's not giving you much of a floor or ceiling this season. He does have a couple games over 25 DraftKings points, just like in his last 10 games. He's playing pretty big minutes, which we obviously love to see. He's played 34, 35, and 35 minutes the last 3 games. We know the minutes are going to be there for Gary Harris. There's going to be games where he makes like a couple threes, knocks down some shots, and he puts up 25 DK points. At 4,200, especially in a matchup against the Wizards, I think he is firmly in play as a value shooting guard, especially like on a 2-game slate. I would probably never be playing Gary Harris on a full slate, but on a 2-gamer where our options are really limited, I think he's for sure an option at 4,200. But let's go ahead and talk about some small forwards now. So you do have Paul George at the top of this position. I'd probably rank Paul George as like my 4th favorite stud on this slate, behind Luka, behind Kawhi Leonard, probably behind Jokic as well. I think I'd play him over Bradley Beal, factoring in salary, but I do prefer Kawhi to Paul George for 600 more. So Paul George is not going to be a core play for me, but it's a 2-game slate. I mean, I'm going to have exposure to Paul George just because we don't have many other options. But like if I'm only playing one lineup, if I'm just looking to find a guy small forward for one lineup, I mean, you can play Kawhi here. You do have Tim Hardaway Jr. you can play here. Davis Bertans is someone I like quite a bit. He's been getting a lot of good run off the bench recently. Played 32, 29, 28, and 29 minutes just the last 4 games. Been seeing a lot of shot volume as well. Double-digit field goal attempts in 4 straight games. Now he gets a matchup against Denver, which is obviously not that great, but he's still pretty cheap on DK. He's pretty cheap on Yahoo as well. Looking at the power forward position, you have PG and Porzingis that you can pay up for at the top of power forward. If you're not paying up for them, you're going to guys like Paul Millsap, Rui, or Davis Bertans. I don't think there's really any minimum salary power forwards I want to play on Yahoo. So Davis Bertans definitely stands out over on Yahoo at only $15. I don't think his price has adjusted to what it should be. I mean, he should probably be about $20 given how well he's played off the bench for the Wizards. He's continuing to see very high minutes, consistent minutes, high 20s, low 30s in minutes just about every night. He's a guy that can make a lot of shots. I mean, if he gets hot from the field, they'll leave him out there. They'll let him play big minutes if he's making a ton of shots. So I do like Bertans quite a bit. $5,200 on DK, $15 on Yahoo. Have a lot more interest in him on Yahoo where his salary is still really cheap, but even at $5,200 on DraftKings, he's firmly in play as sort of a cheaper small forward. But I don't think there's really any punt plays here that I'll be looking to. I mean, DFS, he's going to play probably 30 minutes in this game. The only reason he hasn't played 30 minutes in some of the few games they had, obviously due to blowout against Cleveland Golden State. He played 35 minutes in a competitive game against the Spurs, 32 minutes in a competitive game against the Rockets. He is their starter. He will start at small forward for them. So you could look to DFS for $4,400. I don't think he's the worst value play, but I'd probably be trying to look elsewhere. I mean, DFS just doesn't give you a ton of upside. Rarely is he a guy that's going to give you 30 DraftKings points. I know he's done it a few times recently, but in this offense, his usage rate is just so low. It's going to be Luka and Porzingis doing everything for this Mavericks team. So I don't think I'll really be looking to Finney Smith. But if you got $4,400 for your last spot, I'm fine plugging him in there. Let's go ahead and talk about some power forwards, though. So Porzingis is someone I do like quite a bit here against the Clippers. $6,900 on DraftKings. I think he is pretty underpriced. I mean, Porzingis has been really good this season with the Mavericks. We can go back to the Mavericks' usage so far this season. I mean, I know Porzingis' usage is very high, but we will just show you guys real quick. Obviously, Luka's going to have a very high usage rate. So Porzingis with the Mavericks this season is averaging 1.19 fantasy points per minute, has a 26.2% usage rate, and 469 minutes. Obviously, Porzingis is a strong play on a 2-game slate, especially where he's really nicely priced on DraftKings at $6,900. At power forward on Yahoo, where your options are really limited, if you can't get up to Paul George at $44, I do like Porzingis quite a bit at $33. I'm definitely fine dropping down to the value we have with Bertans at $15, but I do like Porzingis as well at $33. I think he's too cheap on both sides. I'm totally fine playing him and Luka together, especially since it's just a 2-game slate. You can obviously play those guys together with how limited our options are at each position. So I like Porzingis quite a bit at power forward. I think Paul Millsap is someone that stands out at $5,400 on DraftKings. I do like this matchup for him a lot against a Wizards team that is really not good defensively. Just looking at defensive rating this season, the Wizards are not dead last, but second to last behind the Warriors in terms of worst defensive rating. If we look at pace as well, the Wizards are a top 5 team in pace. They rank 5th, so this is a pace-up spot for the Nuggets. They're facing a bad Wizards defense. Just a really good spot for all these guys. I definitely like Paul Millsap at only $5,400 on DraftKings. The guy's been very productive recently, giving you over 30 DraftKings points, and looks like 5 of the last 6 games, maybe 6 of, Millsap's been really consistent lately. His worst game, just like in his last 7, was 29.5 DK points. At $5,400, for him to be like a good play at this price, I would say you probably need about 30 DraftKings points from him, and he can easily get that against a bad Wizards defense. I like Paul Millsap quite a bit on DraftKings at $5,400. You can also play him on Yahoo as well at power forward. He's kind of in like no man's land though. Like for $21, I think I'd be fine saving $6 to play Bertans at $15, or just trying to find the extra salary to get up to Porzingis at $33. But like if you're building out a lineup and you got $21 left for your util, Millsap's probably the best play on Yahoo at $21. I mean, yeah, I'd definitely play him over Rui, Beverly, Thomas. So Millsap's for sure a good option. I have more interest in him on DraftKings, but obviously he's in play on Yahoo as well. For value at power forward, though, I don't think there's really anything I like under 5K. Rui's minutes have been really inconsistent lately. Don't know if I really want to go to him at $4,500, even though he's really cheap. Mo Wagner's been seeing some decent minutes off the bench. He'll really benefit. Like if Thomas Bryant's ever in foul trouble or something, Wagner will benefit. I mean, he did play 19 minutes last game against the Kings, which wasn't a lot, but he was very productive, putting up 32 DraftKings points in only 19 minutes. Wagner is a pretty productive player, can give you a double-double if he plays 20 minutes. At 4,500, I mean, he's not going to be a core play for me by any means. I definitely would want exposure to him, though, if I was playing multiple lineups. I would want to get some exposure to him just because he has so much upside if something were to ever happen to Thomas Bryant. So you could look to Wagner as a value at this position, but let's go ahead and move on to center real quick. Knockout center before we end the video. So you got Jokic at the top for 9,800. This is a great spot for Nikola Jokic against the Wizards. DraftKings did do a pretty good job of pricing him up for this matchup. Even though he only put up 35 DraftKings points in his last game against the Suns, he was 9,200 in that game. DraftKings didn't lower his price. I mean, they bumped it up actually to 9,800. So that was a good job by them. Over on Yahoo, though, I think that's where I have a lot of appeal on Jokic. I mean, he's $40 at center. And if we just look at the center position on Yahoo, there's really only 4 guys I want to go to, and that's either Jokic, Harrell, Bryant, or Wagner. I don't see myself playing Zubac, and there's no $10 centers that I think are playable. Like, you have Dwight Powell at $10, but he just doesn't do much for this Dallas team. You just don't have a lot of upside for Dwight Powell, so I'm going to be paying up for Jokic a ton on Yahoo at the center position, and just comparing his price to the other studs on Yahoo, he really stands out, given that he's cheaper than Kawhi, Bill, George. He's cheaper than all those guys. Going to be a lot of Luka and Jokic for me over on Yahoo. On DraftKings, you can definitely play Jokic as well at 9,800, but given that they did price him up to nearly almost 10K, I think I'd be fine saving $1,000 playing Kawhi Leonard, saving $1,600 playing Paul George. So other centers you could look to besides Jokic, you do have Porzingis here, who I like quite a bit. I'd definitely take Porzingis over Harrell. Thomas Bryant, 5,800, I think is pretty interesting. It's a tough matchup against Denver, obviously a very solid defensive team, but Bryant's just such a productive player. He's going to play big minutes as long as he can stay out of foul trouble. You're probably going to get about mid-30s in minutes from Bryant. He played 28 minutes against the Kings in that game. He didn't have any foul trouble in that game, I don't believe, just 28 minutes. I imagine some of that had to do with like Wagner playing really well. He got 34 minutes against the Hornets, 38 DraftKings points in that game. Thomas Bryant does give you a pretty high ceiling. He has power forward and center eligibility on DraftKings, which makes him very appealing. I'd probably feel safer going to Paul Millsap for 400 less, but I feel like Thomas Bryant probably gives you a higher ceiling than Paul Millsap. So like for safety, Millsap's the play. For ceiling, I think Thomas Bryant's the play. Just choosing between those two guys. Bryant, though, I do like quite a bit at 4,800. Below 5K, though, there's really no value I like. No cheap plays at center. Just going to be playing like a lot of Porzingis, some Bryant here. You can play Paul Millsap here. If you can get to Jokic, he's obviously a really good play as well. But that's just kind of how I'm looking to approach this 2-game slate, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this video, and hopefully it did help you. Like always, I do appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you drop a like before we get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Click that notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload. You can also follow me on Twitter. Link is down in the description at DFS by Noah. Very active over on Twitter. Would appreciate it if you guys would give me a follow over there. But good luck tonight. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.